love when I get to talk about good movies. It's so refreshing, and I feel like we could use a little happiness and positivity in these times. Which is slightly ironic for the movie we'll be reviewing and discussing today, The Invisible Man, a sci-fi horror film released in February earlier this year. And with the spooky season upon us, it's aptly appropriate for this time of year. Certainly not the most happy-feely film, but for me, as someone who is very much a non-fan of horror in general because I'm a complete weenie with jump scares and suspense, if I can speak so highly of this movie, then it's definitely something special. If you'd like to skip the plot overview and get straight into my spoiler-free thoughts, you can skip to this timestamp in the video. So with that said, let's see what this movie has in store for us. Or not, cause, you know, you know what I mean. Let's just get to the plot overview. The movie begins at the home of a wealthy scientist named Adrian and his girlfriend Cecilia. In the middle of the night, after drugging Adrian with diazepam, Cecilia sneaks over to their closet to open a hidden safe and grabs a bag full of important items she had stashed away, intending to leave her boyfriend. As she's disabling the security system, she notices a seemingly empty rack behind a locked glass door, but pays it no mind. She exits through the garage to find their dog and takes off his shock collar before she goes, but the dog accidentally bumps into one of the cars and sets off the alarm, waking Adrian. Cecilia runs for the high fence surrounding the property and climbs it, sprinting through the woods for the road. Her sister Emily arrives to pick her up, and as Cecilia is loading her bag into the car, she unknowingly drops the bottle of diazepam. Once she is inside the car and closes the door, Adrian runs up and smashes the window, grabbing at Cecilia and begging her to stay. 'Cause that's how you convince a girl to stay with you. But they drive off and escape, and Adrian finds the diazepam bottle in the middle of the road. 2 weeks later, Cecilia is hiding out at the home of police officer friend James and his daughter Sydney. Cecilia is extremely paranoid that Adrian will find her, struggling to even step outside the house. Emily arrives to bring her the news that Adrian has committed suicide, much to Cecilia's relief, as she finally admits to Emily and James the extent of the abuse she endured, both mentally and physically, and also mentioning that Adrian wanted to have a baby with her, but she was secretly taking birth control. No longer worried about Adrian finding her, she confidently goes outside to get the mail, but there's a letter addressed to her despite no one supposedly knowing she is staying there. And it's from Adrian's brother and attorney, Tom. She goes to a meeting with him where he informs her that Adrian left her $5 million, which she's confused about, but accepts it, using some of the money to set up a bank account for Sydney so she can attend fashion school. But from then on, weird things begin happening, like when she's cooking breakfast and it suddenly catches fire, cold breath appearing behind her outside, the sheets being dragged off the girls while they're sleeping, then someone seeming to stand on it, and a general uneasy feeling. James brushes it off like she's being haunted, metaphorically, not literally, by the memory of Adrian and tells her not to be afraid of him anymore. The next day, Cecilia has a job interview at an architectural firm but opens her briefcase to find her portfolio missing. She begins to panic and then suddenly faints, but at the hospital she seems fine and is sent home. Later, she gets a call from the doctor who says she likely passed out due to a mild overdose of diazepam, but Cecilia insists she hasn't taken it. Then she finds the missing diazepam bottle on the bathroom counter. She goes to Tom and says when they were together, Adrian told her she could never leave him, that he would approach her, but she wouldn't see him, though he would leave a sign that he was there. She claims that as a very successful optic scientist, Adrian must have faked his death and somehow found a way to make himself invisible. Tom insists Adrian is truly dead and shows her pictures of his dead body, saying he's just gotten into her head, which he understands since he hated his brother as well. Cecilia goes to get help from Emily, who is very angry over a nasty email supposedly sent by Cecilia. She tries to explain she sent no such email, but she gets shut out. Going home to check her sent messages on her computer, and there is a brutal email sent to her sister, saying things like she never wants to see her again and she wishes Emily was dead, causing an emotional breakdown when she discovers this. Sydney goes to comfort her, but is suddenly punched in the face by an unseen force, and she and James believe Cecilia did it, so they leave the house. Now alone at home, Cecilia calls Adrian's cell phone and hears it ringing from the attic. Really, dude? You couldn't have put that thing on silent when you're trying to be all sneaky? Pfft, amateur. furniture. She goes up to the attic on a ladder and finds her missing portfolio along with the phone and several photos of her and Sydney sleeping. And a text message is suddenly sent to the phone from an unknown number that says, "Surprise." She hears a noise by the attic door and looks down to see no one there, but she tosses paint from a nearby can and it covers an invisible person who falls from the ladder and runs off. She tries to follow the person, but they've washed off the paint rather quickly in the kitchen sink, and she is attacked. She manages to fend off the invisible person long enough to flee the house and call an Uber to take her to Adrian's home. She goes to the seemingly empty rack she saw in his laboratory before and finds a full-body suit that makes the wearer appear invisible. So she takes it and hides it in the closet safe. The invisible person arrives and attacks once more, but Cecilia is able to escape thanks to the dog getting in the way. This poor dog who has been in this home all by himself. Has anyone even been feeding him? Oh, poor pupper. She calls Emily to meet her at a restaurant so they're in a public place, thinking it will be safe. But as Cecilia is about to explain what's happened, Emily is quickly killed by a floating knife that is put in Cecilia's hand to make it seem like she did it. She is arrested and put in a mental hospital, and as she's being drugged, she hears a voice say "surprise" before she passes out. The police, including James, interview her, but they seem to think she is crazy, going on about how a supposedly dead man is still there, but they just can't see him. And she is also told by the doctors that she is pregnant. Tom visits and informs her that the money is being revoked, meaning Sydney will lose her tuition money since Celia has committed a criminal act, but says he can make it all go away if she has the baby and goes back to Adrian. Oh shit. Tom says Adrian knew she was secretly taking birth control and replaced it with something else, and that he's punished her enough and she can have a life with him now. Cecilia refuses, knocking the papers off the table and stealing a pen from his briefcase while he picks them up, then hiding the pen in the doorframe so the nurses don't find it when she's left alone for the night. She begins to slit her wrist with the pen so Adrian will make her stop, then stabs him repeatedly, causing his suit to flicker in and out of visibility. Security comes after hearing all the commotion, but he attacks and incapacitates all of them before running from the building. Cecilia grabs a gun from one of the security officers and chases Adrian outside, but he sneaks up on her and pins her down, telling her he won't kill her since she is pregnant with his child, but that won't stop him from killing the people she loves, threatening to go after Sydney. Cecilia steals a car and uses the cell phone inside to call James, who is out working, and warn him that Sydney is in danger, so he rushes home. Adrian breaks into the home and attacks Sydney and James, but Cecilia arrives and sprays him with a fire extinguisher to see where he is, and shoots him several times until he falls to the ground dead. But once she takes off the mask, she sees it's actually Tom in the suit. The SWAT team goes to Adrian's house and finds him tied up in the basement, seemingly a victim of his brother's antics. Cecilia, of course, doesn't believe it and says Adrian must have made Tom put on the suit so he could pretend to be the victim. But with the evidence they have, there's nothing the police can do. Almost a little humorous considering the current events going on right now. So Cecilia calls Adrian and goes to his house, both of them sitting down to dinner while he plays nice. She is wearing a wire with James listening outside the property, and she tries to get Adrian to admit what he did and tells him they can mend their relationship if he confesses to her. But he doesn't, instead subtly implying that he did in only a way she would understand, referring to the surprise that's been kind of a recurring theme here. This causes her to become emotional, and she excuses herself to the bathroom to clean herself up. Back in the dining room, Adrian appears to slit his own throat at the table in full view of the security camera. Cecilia walks back from the bathroom and is horrified when she discovers Adrian bloody and slowly dying on the floor, so she frantically calls 911. But then she steps back from view of the camera as he is bleeding to death, and her distraught expression immediately falls, and she tells him, "Surprise," indicating she killed him using the second invisible suit. As she is leaving, with the dog this time, thank God, James runs in, having heard everything, and even though he sees the suit in her bag, he agrees Adrian killed himself, and Cecilia is finally free. I'm very surprised at how well this movie turned out, not just because modern horror films tend to be either a huge hit or an extreme miss, and not much in between, but because of how plans for this film originated and what it was originally supposed to be. Production first began way back in 2006, then it got dropped and revived in 2016 with intentions to have Johnny Depp star in it and be part of Universal's Monster series alongside The Mummy with Tom Cruise. Yeah, that one. But then that bombed, and it wasn't until just last year the studio shifted gears to focus on this one individual story without worrying about trying to fit it into some series or extended cinematic universe, and it certainly paid off. As I said in the beginning of the video, more often than not, horror really isn't my thing, but I can make an exception for a film that does its job extraordinarily well, is wonderfully made, and tells an excellent story, all of which The Invisible Man does in spades. This movie was written, directed, and produced by Leigh Whannell, who wrote and starred in Saw. Yes, the original, iconic Saw. Then wrote half the franchise and produced the rest, including the upcoming reboot, Spiral, with Chris Rock. So needless to say, this guy's got some experience in the horror genre. This movie is so suspenseful, often panning across a room, and we know we're supposed to be looking for something, and we're waiting for something to happen, but nothing ever does at first. So when things do start happening, it's very unnerving. It's not all about the loud jump scares. While there are some, it's really not many, and the film is still plenty scary. And doing it in this way makes the few jump scares extra effective and feels like they're earned because of the tension and mystery that's built throughout. The action scenes I especially like because they had many long continuous shots without many cuts, which is one of my biggest pet peeves with action, is too many cuts that make it impossible to keep up with what's happening. The film is also very dedicated to the psychological aspects of the horror, getting the main character Cecilia cut off from her friends and family, making her wonder if she really is just going crazy like everyone thinks. And since by that point it's been thoroughly established just how much we like this character and want good things for her, that makes it all the more suspenseful. Many horror protagonists make dumb decisions. That's one of the biggest tropes of the genre and something else that really grinds my gears, but I love the character of Cecilia. Elisabeth Moss is fantastic. It's so easy to care about her because the problem she's dealing with of trying to flee an abusive relationship is very relatable for many people. I also have to make note of the music, which also is excellent. In the majority of films, the score or soundtrack isn't something extraordinary, it's just kind of there and doesn't add a whole lot, but that's definitely not the case here. And all this combined with the events that happen towards the end, no spoilers of course, but it is very satisfying. Not just what happens, but how it happens. There are very few films where by the end I just want to stand up and cheer even when it's a happy ending, but the temptation was there by the time the credits rolled. I'm not gonna lie. This was the second Blumhouse film I saw in one night alongside The Hunt, and while The Hunt wasn't bad, The Invisible Man is by far the more superior film, and honestly, I think my favorite horror film ever, period. There are some more minor plot holes and questions that come about during parts of the film, like certain times where it doesn't seem very feasible that the Invisible Man has followed her to a new place within such a short period of time. Or if the Invisible Man is physically there but just can't be seen, why does no one try to go touch him? It would clear up the issue of people not believing the main character really quickly, but of course, we can't have that because then the movie wouldn't happen. It's little things like that which don't really detract much from the story, but once you do notice it, then it's difficult to ignore. Though even with its imperfections, this is a wonderfully made film and so entertaining. Even as someone who's normally not a big fan of horror, I absolutely love it. So because of this, I'm giving The Invisible Man my personal score of 9 out of 10. From what I've read, there is likely a spin-off in the works titled The Invisible Woman, featuring the Invisible Man's female counterpart based on the original 1940s story, and was set for Elizabeth Banks to star in, direct, and produce. Leigh Whannell is not set to be attached to it in any way, and the screenwriter on board has done some okay films in the past, but nothing really notable. So I'm a little anxious for this, and really hope it doesn't tarnish such an already amazing film, but we'll see how it goes. Let me know know what you think in the comments and if you have any movies you'd like me to discuss and review in the future. Thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like and subscribe if you have not already. And until next time, I will see you guys later. Bye!